You came back. Good. Pull up a chair and try not to make a sound. This is the last whisper. You ever notice how some houses just feel wrong the second you walk past them? Not haunted in the movie way, just quiet. Too quiet. Like the walls are holding their breath. There's a house like that on the edge of a small town in the Pacific Northwest. The paint is peeling, the windows are dark, and if you stand there long enough at night, you might see something move behind the glass on the second floor. Just for a second. Just enough to make you wonder if you're imagining it. The people who used to live there don't talk about what happened. Most of them are dead now. But the ones who remember still lock their doors before sunset. Because what came for that family didn't leave when the story ended. It just found a new way in. Lucas Bennett was 14 when the car hit the tree. His older sister Emma was driving. She was 17, just got her license 2 weeks earlier, and their mother had finally agreed to let her take Lucas to the store for snacks. It was supposed to be a 10-minute trip. The road was empty. The radio was playing some pop song neither of them liked. Emma was laughing at something Lucas said when the headlights caught something standing in the middle of the lane. She swerved. The car left the road. The tree didn't move. Emma died on impact. The steering wheel crushed her chest. Lucas survived because he was in the passenger seat and because the universe has a sick sense of humor. He broke 3 ribs, fractured his collarbone, and walked away with a cut above his left eye that would scar for the rest of his life. The doctors told his mother he was lucky. They didn't know yet that lucky was the wrong word. The first thing Lucas noticed when he woke up in the hospital was that he couldn't feel his hands. Not the way normal people can't feel them when they're cold. He genuinely couldn't tell where his fingers ended and the bedsheet began. The nurse asked him to squeeze her hand. He tried. She smiled and said, "Good job." Lucas knew he hadn't moved a muscle. The second thing he noticed was the man standing at the foot of his bed. He was tall, too tall for the ceiling. He wore a black coat that didn't reflect any light, and he had no face, just smooth, pale skin stretched over where eyes and a mouth should be. Lucas blinked. The man was gone. The nurse didn't see anything. His mother came to pick him up 3 days later. She didn't cry in front of him. She just held his bag with both hands and walked him to the car like she was afraid he might break if she let go. They drove home in silence, the kind of silence that used to be filled with Emma's voice. Victor Bennett was waiting in the driveway when they pulled up. Lucas hadn't seen his father in 4 years, not since the night Victor came home drunk, grabbed his wife by the throat, and told her if she ever tried to leave, he'd make sure she never walked again. Emma had been 12. She'd stood between them with a baseball bat and told him to get out. He did, and he never came back, until now. Victor looked older. His hair was thinning. His hands shook when he reached for Lucas's shoulder. Lucas stepped back without thinking. His mother didn't say anything. She just unlocked the door and went inside. The house felt smaller than Lucas remembered. The walls seemed closer together. The lights were too bright in some rooms and too dim in others. And everywhere he went, he felt like someone was standing just behind him, close enough that if he turned around fast enough, he'd see them. He never did. The first night home, Lucas woke up at 2:17 in the morning because he heard his sister laughing. Emma's laugh had been loud, the kind that made other people smile even when they didn't know the joke. This laugh was different. It came from the hallway outside his room. It sounded like it was coming from inside the walls. Lucas got out of bed. His legs didn't want to move, but something else did. Something that wasn't quite him. He walked to the door and opened it. The hallway was empty, but at the far end, near the stairs, something was standing forming something A shape, a coat, a blank white face. Victor kept talking, something about how he was sorry, how he wanted to be there for the funeral but he couldn't, how he was trying now. Lucas wasn't listening. The thing in the corner was walking toward his father, slow, deliberate. Lucas didn't answer. He turned and walked back upstairs. He locked his bedroom door. He pushed his dresser in front of it, and he sat on the floor with his back against the wall until the sun came up. The next few weeks were a slow unraveling. Lucas stopped going to school. His mother tried to make him. She said it would be good for him to be around other kids. But Lucas knew what would happen if he went. The thing in the black coat would follow him, and it would find someone else to whisper to. So he stayed home. He sat in his room with the curtains closed and listened to the house breathe. His mother started having nightmares. She told Lucas she kept dreaming about Emma, about the car, about the tree. But in the dreams, Emma wasn't alone. There was someone standing behind her in the back seat. Someone tall, someone who didn't have a face. Lucas didn't tell her he'd been having the same dreams. Victor tried to be a father. He made breakfast. He asked Lucas about his day. He even tried to fix the leaky faucet in the bathroom. But every time he got close to Lucas, the air in the room would change. It would get colder, thicker, and Lucas would see the thing standing in the doorway, watching, waiting. One night, Lucas found his mother crying in the laundry room. She was sitting on the floor with a basket of folded towels in her lap. When she saw him, she tried to smile. It didn't work. "I don't know what to do," she said. "He wants to stay. He says he can help. But every time I look at him, I see..." She stopped. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Lucas knew what she saw. He saw it too. The night it happened, the house was quiet. Lucas had been in his room since dinner. He hadn't eaten. He couldn't. The food tasted like ash. His mother had knocked on his door twice. The second time, she'd left a plate outside. It was still there when Lucas opened the door at midnight. He walked downstairs. The living room was dark. The only light came from the kitchen. Victor was standing at the counter with his back to the door. He was pouring himself another drink. His hands were shaking so badly that whiskey splashed onto the counter. Lucas didn't remember picking up the knife. It was just there, in his hand. The blade caught the light from the window. It looked almost beautiful. Victor turned around. He saw the knife. He saw Lucas's face. And for the first time in years, Lucas saw real fear in his father's eyes. "Lucas," Victor said. His voice was small. "Put that down, please." Lucas didn't move. The thing in the black coat was standing behind his father now. It had both hands on Victor's shoulders. Its fingers were long, too long. They wrapped around Victor's neck like they were measuring him. Victor took a step forward. "I know I wasn't there." The thing behind him leaned in. Its face was right next to Victor's ear, and this time, Lucas heard the whisper. It sounded like wind through dead leaves. It sounded like a child crying. It sounded like Emma's voice saying Lucas's name. Victor screamed. He grabbed at his own ears like he was trying to pull something out. He stumbled backward. His hip hit the counter. The bottle of whiskey fell and shattered. The smell filled the room. Sharp, sweet, wrong. Lucas moved without thinking. The knife went into Victor's stomach. Once, twice, 3 times. Victor tried to grab him. Lucas twisted the blade. Victor's hands went limp. He slid down the counter and sat on the floor. Blood pooled around him. Dark, almost black in the low light. Lucas stood there and watched his father die. He didn't feel anything. Not guilt, not relief, just empty. Like someone had reached inside him and taken out everything that made him Lucas. Lucas walked past her. He opened the back door. He stepped into the night. The air was cold. The trees at the edge of the yard were moving even though there was no wind. He walked into the woods. He poured gasoline on the ground behind him. A trail, a path. When the can was empty, he struck a match. The flame was small, almost gentle. Then he dropped it. The fire caught fast. It raced along the trail of gasoline and climbed into the trees. The whole forest seemed to light up at once. Lucas could hear sirens in the distance. He could see the red and blue lights flashing through the smoke, but he didn't run. He just stood there and watched the fire eat the world. The thing in the black coat was standing beside him now, closer than it had ever been. Its hand rested on Lucas's shoulder. The touch was cold, not the cold of winter, the cold of something that had never been alive. Lucas looked up at it. For the first time, his mother moved away. She lives in another state now. She doesn't talk about what happened. She doesn't answer questions. But sometimes, late at night, she swears she can hear laughter coming from the empty room at the end of the hall. Emma's laughter, the kind that used to fill the house. And sometimes, if you drive past that burned out house on the edge of town, you'll see something standing in the upstairs window, just for a second, just long enough to make you wonder if you're imagining it. But you're not. It's still there. And it's looking for someone else to whisper to.